just hard. And I don't mean just a little bit hard, I mean really hard. When you stood before God and state to enter into a legally binding covenant with another human being, there is a lot that has to go on there. I mean, now you guys have to combine your lives dealing with in-laws, looking at careers, looking at cleaning habits, co-parenting with exes if you're a blended family, bedroom worship, that's what we like to call it, and so much more. Now, as you can imagine, that so much more does include your money. And with research showing that over 75% of people have a different money management style from their spouse, things can get really, really complicated. And the only way to begin to uncomplicate it is to sit down and have some really good conversations about money with your spouse. Something that comes with its own unique set of pitfalls if you don't do it very well. That's why today I've decided to combine my roughly 8 years of being a married woman with my years as a money coach, plus, just some conventional wisdom I've learned over the years to break down 7 very common mistakes that couples make when trying to talk about money and, most importantly, how to avoid them. Hey dreamers, and welcome back to my channel where we break down all things money so it can stop being an obstacle and start being what it was designed to be, a tool to help you create the life that God has designed just for you. Now, if you are new around the podcast, around the channel, then let me just go ahead, take a moment and introduce myself. My name is Tiana Clewis. I'm an executive pastor, author, speaker, and money coach who's made it her mission to help Christian women bust through the financial barriers that have her saying, nope, not yet, Lord, to what it is He's calling them to do on a full-time basis. Whether it's starting a business, stepping into ministry, or creating a nonprofit to serve God's people, well, sometimes when the bank account's not looking right, it's really hard to make that faith move. That's why I founded this channel, because, well, I'm sitting on the opposite side of that table and I want to help you get there too. Now, this sounds like something you need in your life. Let me know by liking the video and following my channel by clicking the big red button below. Don't forget to hit the bell so that you're notified every time I drop brand new money tips and biblical strategies designed to help you transfer money from your biggest stumbling block into your greatest ally. One more thing before I get started. I want to give you a very important disclaimer. Now, if you've been following me for a while, then you know that when it comes to finances and relationships, I strongly discourage people who are not married, i.e. not in covenant with one another, to not really combine finances for a number of reasons, but that is a whole nother conversation that I probably should create a video on specifically. Anywho, the point is, as I'm talking about this, you're going to hear me say spouse. You're going to hear me say wife. You're going to hear me say husband. You're probably not going to hear me say, significant other. Yeah, I might toss a boo thing in there. But the point is, just because you hear me using these terms doesn't mean that this doesn't apply to unmarried couples who have chosen to combine their finances anyway. These rules still apply. So whether you're married or not, if you have combined finances with your spouse, or if you're married and you haven't combined finances, you really need to go ahead and do that and use these rules to help make it a lot easier. Now that disclaimer is out the way, let's dive into this by talking about the first mistake that people make, and that usually starts before you even get into the conversation. So one of the things that I highly advise you to do is that before you even sit down and have a money talk with your spouse, take the time to write down what your concerns are, what your issues are, what questions, your desired outcome. Sit down, think through those things, and write them down on a piece of paper or in the notes on your phone like I do all the time. The point is that sometimes you go into these conversations and you had all these ideas of what you wanted to talk about, but you get into the conversation and someone says something, it takes you down a rabbit hole, or your mind just goes blank in the moment. Well, if you have everything written down, you know your desired outcome, you know what your concerns are, then you can actually have those ready to go. It also gives you the opportunity to identify anything that you want to bring up that might be a little touchy and might result in a bit of conflict. It then gives you the ability to, practice, find a good, effective way to say it. As someone who has spent years learning tact, because it is not the natural language of either side of my family, mom or dad, tact. It's not something we learn. I've had to develop tact, and I've had to learn how to practice how I say certain things to my husband to make sure that is received in a healthy manner. Sometimes when you're saying something, it can accidentally come across as accusatory, and that's not what you intend. But the moment that it comes across as accusatory, they're on the defensive and the whole conversation goes downhill. So if you take the time to write down your concerns, your questions, your desired outcomes in advance, not only do you make sure you don't forget anything and miss anything in the conversation, it also gives you the opportunity to identify anything that might be sensitive, so that then you can actually practice saying it in a way that can be effectively received. The second mistake that I commonly see couples make is trying to discuss money at a time that's only convenient for one of you. So here's the deal. When you are having a conversation about money, especially if it can be a little bit of a touchy subject, you need both people locked in, fully engaged. Like, we need to be in this thing together. You know what I mean? You need to be in it, all in it, undistracted with kind of your expectations, and like knowing that you need to, like, having planned out the controlling of your emotions, again, if this becomes a touchy conversation. And so with that in mind, a mistake that a lot of people make is that they will just like, hey, we need to talk about money. And then it's just like, boom, like now? Well, what if your spouse isn't like ready to talk about money right now? Like, what if it's not convenient for them? What if they haven't had a chance to put their thoughts together? And so you sit there and either you don't let them get their thoughts organized, like you've now gotten your thoughts organized because you didn't make the mistake in number one. Well, they need the opportunity to do the same thing. You also want to make sure that you're not forcing the conversation in that inconvenient moment, because you are automatically guaranteeing that the conversation is not going to go well, because you have now forced this conversation when it's not convenient for your spouse, and now they're defensive, they're frustrated, they're irritated, they can't give it their all because they're thinking about some of the other things that they should have been doing or would have been doing at that moment in time, or they're thinking about the sheer level of disrespect that you've shown by not caring enough to help map out the time when it's appropriate for both of you. So yeah, doesn't go well when you do that. So what you really need to do is you and your spouse need to have a quick conversation and decide when you are going to talk about money. Set aside anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour where you guys can be ready, focused, and have that conversation. And sometimes it means that you even have to plan not just the date and time, but you may even have to plan the location where you can get away from like certain distractions, or where you can be in like a space that you feel comfortable or safe having the conversation. So yeah, do not make the mistake of trying to have the conversation or force the conversation at a time that's only convenient for one of you. Plan out the time in advance and including the space so that now you can both be locked in, prepared, and, you know, just mentally and emotionally ready to have this potentially intense conversation. Now let's talk about some mistakes that people make when they're actually in the conversation. And the first mistake that I see people make when they're actively in the conversation, which is technically mistake number 3 on this list, we make the mistake of actually condemning our spouse when they revealed a financial mistake that they've made. Now, look, when you've done something dumb and you know or have an idea that you've done something dumb, you're already kind of beating yourself up about it. You're already kind of feeling bad about it. And you're already feeling uncomfortable about discussing it, revealing it, and like literally just putting yourself out there to expose yourself as a momentary idiot. That is really, really uncomfortable. And the last thing that you want in response is for your spouse, who you have now laid bare this embarrassing thing to, that now they're condemning you. They're making you feel bad. They're talking noise about you. They're making you feel even worse. They're making you feel like a horrible person. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't communicate how what the person did upset you, how it impacted you, that sort of thing. No, you should still share those things. But as my lovely therapist likes to say, the truth in love. You can tell the truth about how you felt about a situation, the impact that the situation had. You can have that conversation in a loving way without sounding condemning. I don't have to say you're an idiot for doing that. What I can say is, I don't think that was the best decision to make at the time. I really wish that you hadn't done it, or I really wish that you would have had a conversation with me before you did it. But at this point, it's done now. Let's figure out what we're going to do. At this point, you essentially communicated what you don't like, what you would rather have happen, and then let's just look to the future. And here's the thing. If you don't approach it that way, if you don't communicate that truth and love, what's going to end up happening is now your spouse is going to want to hide things from you. They're not going to feel comfortable revealing mess ups and mistakes to you because you have essentially made this an unsafe space for them to be honest and transparent with you. So if you want to have really good conversations with your spouse, then you have to be willing to, check your tongue, use a little tact when they're revealing a mistake or you're just discussing or talking about a mistake that they've made, because you need to make it where these financial conversations are a safe space. They need to feel safe and comfortable to be open and transparent with you about things that they've done, because if they're not open and honest with you about things that they've done, well, you can't make a good plan. Speaking of being open and honest, that is mistake number 4. A common thing that people do when they are having conversations with their spouse is that they don't bother to put on their big girl panties and just tell the truth about what the heck is going on. Look, you can have your spouse reveal something to you and you make the mistake of condemning them, but in the same token, you might actually have the fear of being condemned by your spouse. Look, I have been there, I have done that. I will admit to you that there were times when my husband did things and I was a total butthole to him. I've learned how to be better. Again, I'm learning truth and love. But the thing is, at the same time, it also made me, because of the unsafe space that I had created, it also made me uncomfortable with being open, honest, and transparent about things that I had done. Now, that being said, I did learn to get over it and to get past it. I still ended up putting on my big girl panties and just telling the truth, because at the end of the day, I wanted us to be able to come up with a good and effective plan, and we can't come up with a good and effective plan if I'm not honest about the mistakes I've made. But literally, I had to get to a point where I was willing to just say, hey, I did this thing and I realized that the reason I did this thing was because I was mad at you about X, Y, and Z, and now it's had blah, 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 blah impact. And I'm sorry that I did that. I'm not, that's not something I plan on doing again. I was open and honest about it. And the response that I got from my husband was like, with all the dumb things I've done, do you really think I'm going to chastise you for this? I really appreciated it, especially considering, again, I'd been a butthole to him about some things in the past. But the thing is, not only do you have to create a safe space for your spouse to share, you also have to essentially lead by example by being open, honest, and transparent about the things that you've done. Also, consider this. If you're sitting here trying to hide what has happened or what you've done, mistakes that you've made, what's going to happen is that at some point, as you're working through the plan and certain things are not coming out the way that we intended, eventually the truth is going to be dug up. And when the truth is dug up, it's going to do some long-term damage to your relationship, because that is going to create or further any trust issues that already exist in your marriage. So it's very, very important that you are open, honest, and transparent so that you can plan well and so that you can get the truth out of the way so that it doesn't do more damage to your family in the long term. The 5th mistake I want to cover is not having an open mind to other ideas. Now, oftentimes, if you are the person who has decided to initiate this conversation, you're the one who watched my YouTube videos and said, yeah, we're going to sit down and have a conversation about money. Well, oftentimes when you're having these conversations, people will typically take some time to think about like what they want to do, what their plan is. So you are probably walking to this conversation with a plan of what you want to do. But the truth is that there is more than one way to skin pretty much every financial cat that you're going to come across. And so you cannot sit here and assume that the plan that you came up with is the only plan that will work, because it might not be. There might be some things that you didn't consider. There might be some, some different perspectives that you didn't even know about, that then now that you know about this extra perspective that your spouse might have because they think differently from you, that then you actually have another way in which you can do this that is even better than what you originally had planned. So you really have to walk into the conversation. Yes, have your plan, but be open to shifting, changing, modifying, and compromising on that plan where needed to make it more effective. You also have to remember that when it comes to being open-minded, if you are closed-minded with your spouse when they come up with ideas, what's going to happen is that at some point your spouse is probably going to get resentful of the fact that they were unheard in the conversation. And so they might not be fully engaged. They might become really disengaged with the process. They might become very uninterested. Or if they are a petty individual, they might actually actively sabotage your attempts. And that's the last thing that you want. So Do not walk into the conversation with a closed mind. Make sure that you are open to different ideas and compromises when you step into the conversation. Mistake number 6 that I want to talk about is one that I have seen in a lot of companies and a lot of couples, that tend to have trust issues because of maybe past financial infidelity, which I'm going to talk about in an upcoming video, or past sexual, physical infidelity, or like lies, things, whatever. But I see this a lot in couples that have trust issues in them. And the mistake is that you don't assume that your spouse has the family's best interest at heart when they offer an idea. Now, let's be honest about certain things. There are going to be moments when you're making decisions in this planning process that benefits one spouse more than it benefits the other. So for example, when my husband and I were working on paying off our debt, well, we had to pay off one car before we could pay off the other car. And so we decided to pay my car off first. And if you're in a situation where like there's a risk that your marriage might not continue, that you're worried about breaking up or whatever, well, it can actually be really scary to sit here and, oh, I'm going to pay off your car, but I'm going to keep the debt on my car until we're able to pay it off. That can actually be a very uncomfortable situation. Or if you just don't trust your spouse to stick around, you don't trust your spouse to, hold up their end of the bargain. So what might end up happening is that they'll come up with an idea that appears on the surface to benefit them more than it benefits you or benefits the family. And you might assume that it's for selfish reasons when it's not for selfish reasons. It just makes maybe mathematical sense in the moment, or because of some circumstances that you didn't consider or perspectives you didn't consider, it makes the most sense for where your family is right now. But if you have trust issues already with your spouse and you have the bad habit of assuming that they're doing things for selfish reasons and not for the sake of the family, then you will actually find yourself discounting their ideas, and you might even issue the accusation that this plan is selfish or it's intended to be done selfishly, when really they might be honestly just all the way in trying to do the best that they can, and they're genuinely trying to help. So I understand that even if you do have trust issues in your relationship, that this can be really difficult, but you honestly need to take some time to really pump and prime yourself to be able to assume the best of your spouse in this conversation. So it may require that you sit down and have like some counseling, either individually or as a couple, before you can even dive into these money conversations. Because if you are naturally inclined to assume that what they want to do is for their own selfish reasons, this conversation is going to go downhill. It's not going to end well. It's not going to work. And you'll basically end up wasting your time and doing even more damage to the relationship. The last mistake I want to cover is just failing to write down what you guys ultimately decide is your plan. Look, I have lived this one, okay? Where we didn't write down what the final decision was, and like either one of us forgot, and maybe both of us forgot, and like one of us was kind of trying to like make it up on the fly, and it became like a whole thing and we had to have a whole nother conversation. Or like I had one view of the plan, he had another view of the plan, and then it just becomes kind of this he said, she said back and forth about what the ultimate decision was. Well, we've learned to avoid that situation. What we did was we actually created a shared drive where we write down certain key decisions that we've made that will allow you to say, okay, this is what we ultimately decided on, so that now you're both looking at the exact same thing and moving in the same direction. There's no I forgot, there's no he said, she said, none of that. It's right there on paper, well, digital or physical. So there you go. That's the last mistake that a lot of people make. And I've, again, super guilty of it. So learn from my mistakes. When you're having the conversation, whatever you guys decide on, write it down. And there you go. 7 super common mistakes that couples make when trying to have conversations about money. How did you feel about this list? Did you see yourself reflected in some of these mistakes? Or have you maybe done these mistakes in the past and figured out a way to overcome them? Put them in the comments so that we can begin to learn from each other. Speaking of learning from each other, I actually do have something that if you don't know about it yet, let me tell you about it, okay? So the Lord dropped in my spirit to create a community of women entrepreneurs who are walking by faith to create what it is that God has called them to create, whether it is a business or a nonprofit or even a ministry. Look, there is a very unique set of struggles and concerns that we experience as Christian women who are functioning with the entrepreneurial spirit and who are stepping out and creating something new. Because, technically we're listening to a voice that we cannot see guiding us, and sometimes the guidance that God gives is a little contrary to conventional wisdoms about money, about relationships, about business, and etc. And so what the Lord led me to do is to create what's called the Ambitious Dreamers Circle, which is a community of entrepreneurial Christian women who are learning from each other, connecting with each other, and really getting the support that we need to walk out this journey without fear. Because, this thing is hard. And what I want to do is I want to invite you to come check out the circle. See if this is something that maybe God is calling you to as well. A place where you can learn, you can grow, and get the support that you need. All you have to do is head to my website at tianabclewis.com/ambitious. Fill out a quick little questionnaire just so I can learn a little bit about you, and then schedule a time on my calendar so that you and I can chat. Let's see if this is what you need. This is what's going to serve you. If this is what's going to get you where God is calling you to be. And if not, don't worry. I will bless you with some strategies to help you get from point A to, your destiny. Now, that being said, I know you're excited to head over to tianabclewis.com/ambitious in order to get on my calendar, but do me something real quick. Your girl needs a favor, okay? Let me know that you like this video by clicking the thumbs up button below. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the channel by clicking the big red button below. Don't forget to hit the bell so that you're notified every time I drop brand new money tips and biblical strategies designed to help you bust through the financial barriers that have you saying, wait a minute, hold on, not yet, to what it is God's calling you to do. Look, child, green cotton is not going to stop you from hitting your destiny, and I'm not going to let it happen. So, hit that button. Come on, sis. We got work to do. So you get to clicking buttons, booking time on my calendar, and then when you're done, I actually have another video that I've picked just for you to come after this one that you definitely want to check out if you haven't seen it already. And in the meantime, I'm going to head back to work, and I look forward to seeing you guys on my calendar soon. All right, bye-bye.